introduction, presentation, and Q&A will be shared via email tomorrow. Please take a moment to rename yourself with the correct name and pronouns, and ideally your congregation or ministry site if you like. This can usually be done by right-clicking on your image, and the option to rename will pop up. The chat will be closed for general use during our meeting, but it is being monitored for tech support questions by our meeting host, Pastor David Epplesheimer. Is that still true, David?
Sorry, Bishop Laurie, could you repeat what you just asked?
Are you able to monitor things in the chat?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. If you have other assembly inquiries or concerns, please email them to our Synod Assembly Planning Coordinator, Rhonda Powell, at synodassembly@oregonsynod.org. I'll put that in the chat. Here is the plan for tonight. First, we will be hearing from Synod Treasurer Mark Dickman, who will introduce the proposed budget. Once he has presented, I'll move us into a Q&A with Mark Dickman. This is the space to ask all your questions that revolve around clarification or understanding what is going on in different segments of the budget. After the question and answer section, we will move into breakout rooms. If you were here last week, the format is nearly exactly the same. In those breakout rooms, we can discuss things or ask further questions. There will be a facilitator and a recorder in each room. The budget will be available for you to see on your own computer. We'll put a link in the chat. Click there if you'd like to have access to it during the small group breakout discussion. This space will be our time to explore the budget more deeply. I'm energized to learn because the format is different. In breakout rooms, we can have conversations. There don't have to be green yes cards followed by red no cards, but more curiosity, wondering, inquiry, building on ideas. Following this meeting, once Mark and the Synod Council have had a chance to integrate feedback, if there is any that enriches the clarity, spirit, and intent of the budget, we will send a final version to be presented to voting members. And the voting members will decide whether or not to adopt the budget. So again, if you've just arrived, please take a moment to rename yourself, add your pronouns, then we'll move quickly into question and answer after we hear from Treasurer Dickman, and we will be reorganizing people in the order that they raise their hand virtually. So we should practice that. Raising your hand virtually can be done by going to the bottom of your screen. Zoom orders people with raised hands automatically, so hopefully we can practice that. That helps me keep people in kind of a fair line. And so why don't we practice this? If you prefer sunshine in the springtime, raise your electronic hand. Excellent. Now lower. If you prefer rain in the spring, or snow even, raise your electronic hand. If you're struggling to find your electronic hand, raise your actual hand and we'll try to find you. So everyone lower our hands. If you're struggling with the electronic, raise your hand. I'm not seeing anyone. Dawn.
I'm sorry, but the screen kept evolving. I couldn't find me.
Yes, yes. Are you finding the electronic hand? Now you're muted.
I'm sorry. Yes, I find the hand. I just didn't know where I was to see if it was
Perfect.
working.
Perfect. Okay. Hold on to that hand and you may need it during the question and answer. Okay. I think it's time for the main event. I'd like to introduce Synod Treasurer Mark Dickman. He will tell us about his work and that of the Finance Committee and the Synod Council. This is Mark's final assembly after 2 terms of generously and faithfully serving as treasurer of the Oregon Synod. Let's give him a shout out. The work is big and it is sometimes thankless. So, Mark Dickman, thank you for all that you've held and for being here tonight. Would you be willing to share with us the work of the Finance and the Synod Committee and the Synod Council?
With such a marvelous introduction, well, of course. And thank you everyone for being here. I was instructed via the script that I should talk a bit about myself and my work in the Finance Committee. For those of you who haven't heard me before, I'm a retired farmer living east of Mount Angel. I'm a member of Emmanuel in Silverton and a lifelong Lutheran. I'm the husband of Nancy for 52 years, almost, and the father of 3 daughters with 3 sons-in-law and 3 grandkids. My main gig at church right now is as a church musician, but purely an amateur nonetheless. I am a, if you will, believer in the larger church. I think the larger church makes us all better Lutherans, better Christians, if we can be linked across time and space with others who share our similar beliefs, our similar values. And I think that's what motivates me most as Synod Treasurer, is that it's worthwhile to be linked beyond the doors and footprint of our own congregation. As Bishop said, I am nearing the end of my second 4-year term. Serving God in this way has been an honor and a privilege, certainly a unique one. I'm thankful to God for giving me the strength to do it. I'm thankful for my wife for giving me the patience to do it. I'm thankful to Bishop Laurie and all the other people who've encouraged me along. The treasurer doesn't do this job alone. As I like to say, I've got staff for that. Treasurer doesn't touch money. We have a financial services office in Region 1 that does all of the grunt work for all 6 synods in Region 1. It's located in suburban Seattle. That's where you send your mission support. When you send it to P.O. Box 94432 in Seattle, you're sending it to a lockbox. It actually hits the bank really fast that way, but it also gets the information to the FSO, and they do the actual accounting work for that. Receipts and disbursements are a coordinated effort. Many of them pass simply through the FSO. Others will land in the bishop's office, and our staff will handle them. Those things go across my desk, as well as vouchers for payments, which I have to approve, and then on to Region 1, and they cut the checks. So what does the treasurer do? Well, I'm responsible to oversee those receipts and disbursements. I work hard with Region 1 to properly record those transactions. As I said, I review the payment vouchers that come in from the bishop's office for approval each week. I'm also mainly responsible for drafting the budget in conversation with the bishop, bringing them through the process to the Finance Committee, the Synod Council, and finally tonight to the Assembly. I also receive monthly financial reports from FSO, and I do a lot of, I think what best is described as interpretation work for the Synod Council, sometimes also for the bishop and her staff. With the Finance Committee, I also head up management of the Synod's financial resources. That is, where do we make our deposits and investments? If you looked at the selected financial statements that came out this week, you see that the Synod has total assets of right at $6 million right now, and virtually all of it is liquid. It is cash. We don't have hard assets. The exception, as some of you know, is the property formerly known as Bethany Lutheran Church in Northeast Portland, which they deeded to the Synod, but we do not count that on our financial statements. So when you look at those things, There is no value at all for Bethany Lutheran Church property there. We also talk a lot with the Finance Committee when we meet about 5 times a year about the budgets, and they generally tend to help me with financial oversight. It's a sounding board for me. It's a place for them to give advice and suggestions and that sort of thing. I am also a member of the Synod Council by virtue of my office. I'm also a member of the Synod Endowment Board by virtue of my office. So those are kind of the summary of what your treasurer is in the Oregon Synod. I want to go now to the budget, and I think I'm able to screen share. And so I'm going to share mine for a couple of reasons. One is that I think I have a version that uses all the screen. And secondly, I can run it that way. So this is the first page of the budget that I believe you've all received, or at least it all was available to you. I want to remind you that we're talking about the budget for fiscal year 2027. That's the fiscal year that will start February 1 of next year and run through January 31st of the following year. That is 2028. So we're talking about budgeting for a time period that is from 9 to 21 months out in front of us. This makes it interesting to try and estimate these things that far ahead. But that is our system. Churchwide mandates that we be on this February 1 through January 31 fiscal year. And our bylaws also mandate that the assembly approve it, and our assemblies are usually in the spring. So that's how we wind up on this schedule. There are 3 pages to this PDF with the budget. The first page covers the revenue part, that is the incomes that we get into the general fund. These are, in some cases, broad categories, in other cases, rather specific. Each line here, I really can't show you everything. This would just go for pages and pages. But on the sheet that's in front of you, you will see 5 columns. I guess I can't highlight on here. Okay, never mind. But actual fiscal year 2024, these are the actual numbers from the fiscal year prior to the last one. Actual fiscal year 2025, those are the actual numbers for the fiscal year that ended on January 31st. So those are our 2 immediate past years. The column that's in light green is the budget you saw at the assembly last year at assembly and adopted. Now, because we budget so far in advance, we know that we often have to make shifts, and the Synod Council is allowed to make adjustments to the budget that you approved at last assembly, so long as we don't exceed the total bottom line. And so the Synod Council has revised this budget, and what you see in this tan color are the revisions that we adopted in January of this year for the current fiscal year. So if you go down to the bottom here, you'll see that the green column and the tan column both add up to the same amount. So we're not anticipating more money, but we've adjusted some places where it comes from. Now, with that context, we want to talk about the fiscal year 2027 budget tonight, because that's what you are going to be voting on. This budget was adopted in conversation with the bishop. It was taken to the Synod Finance Committee. We had their input on it, and they sent it with a due pass recommendation to Synod Council. The Synod Council discussed it at its March meeting, and they are now sending it to you with the due pass recommendation. In the revenues, mission support is our single largest category, and we are budgeting that your congregations will send mission support to the Oregon Synod totaling $925,000 next year. In 2025, our total was $901,000. That's the highest that we've had in 4 years. And it also came very near meeting our budget. It was only about 0.4% under our budget for last year. This year's budget is $915. Next year, we're proposing $925 for mission support. The next category are the draws we make from our Synod reserve funds. Our Synod reserves have grown significantly. That's how we're worth $6 million today. And we believe that the Synod is expecting us to use some of those dollars to help do our work. This year's budget proposes that we use about $437,000 out of Synod reserves to do the work that is proposed. We get support from ELCA Churchwide for the DEM, that is for the Director of Evangelical Mission. We are budgeting Horizon gifts, that is undesignated gifts to the general fund, of $53,500 in 2027. That's a variable amount. You see in 24, we got $34,000. Last year, we only got $17,000. This year we had budgeted 50 and then decided maybe that's a little too ambitious, so we lowered that to 35. But the bishop and her staff believe they've got some new tricks up their sleeve to entice us to give a little more. And so we've got that number this year. And we have other income. The interest that we earn each year is not insignificant in this budget. We're guessing about $90,000 in interest. We levy some fees on the outside grants that go into Together Lab for administrative work, and we think that'll be $30,000. So total revenue of $1.667 million in fiscal 27. That's a modest increase over the prior year, only about 1.3% or about $21,000. Okay, hang on, we're going down to page 2. And now we're going to look at how we're going to spend this money. First category on line 18 is the support that we send to churchwide. 42 cents out of every dollar that your congregation send to the Synod in mission support is immediately passed on to churchwide for the work of the presiding bishop, his staff, not only in Chicago, but around the world. This is the only way that they get support from congregations. There are no direct gifts, assessments, offerings, whatever, that are designated to go to churchwide from congregations. Your congregation might decide to give to something at churchwide, but that's purely voluntary. But the Oregon Synod sends 42% of all of our mission support dollars to churchwide. That'll be $388,500. The next section, I'm not going to scroll. I'm going to keep it there. And I still have it on the wrong page. There, this is the page we want to be on. We give to some agencies and affiliated organizations like Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary, Campus Ministry, Lutheran Community Services, EMO, Camp Lutherwood. And we're proposing that those gifts total $63,000 last year. We've been growing that number the last several years. About 5 years ago, it was actually about $25,000. About 10 years ago, it was about $125,000. So we're trying to grow that number. This year, the biggest growth is in Camp Lutherwood. I think many of us are aware of the marvelous fundraising drives they've had going. They're doing some new and amazing things there. And we think it's worthy of recognition in our budget to double our support there. $10,000 is still modest, but we do want to send a message to them in congratulations and partnership, and to our congregations that this is important. We have a group of Synod-wide activities and services that we do that total $35,000. That's an increase of about $5,500 over last year. We have a travel budget. This budget got to be very modest during COVID. We're trying to rebuild that. And as you can see, we have, in terms of use, we've been rebuilding it. We actually spent more last year than was in the budget for that. And I think we're going to continue to grow that. We're proposing $72,000 in 2027. I really believe in this line on the budget. I think it's important that we get people, faces in front of our congregations. We need to come see you. And that's what helps to fund that. So the total of these two lines is $107,000. By the way, if you haven't figured out my method here, if a total goes straight across, I show an arrow like that. There's subtotals built in here. So this arrow shows down to this subtotal. And then we take it over and we add it with this. Going to the third page, we bring it all on down on this outside column to the bottom page. We're on the third page of the budget now. The biggest expense for business like church is personnel. That should be no surprise to you. I would guess that's the way your congregations are too. In fiscal year 27, we're proposing the total cost for personnel is going to be about $793,000. Now, you'll note that that is only a little more than what we spent in fiscal 25. And it's less than what we spent or what we budgeted to spend in fiscal 26. But you'll also notice we've revised that number downward by almost $100,000 because the bishop has done some serious realignment work in her office. And there is some work and some staff that has moved off of the general fund budget. That's why this number can be lower and why even next year, in spite of growing programs, it's not much different from what it was last year. We have other expenses that we have to pay for. We contract with Southwest Washington Synod to do some of our grant management work. We're still anticipating that we may hire some outside HR management help. I told you about the financial services office. We don't get that for free, and that cost is going up, as you can see. We probably have really gotten a good deal the last few years. I'm very comfortable with these numbers that I show you. It's a big increase, but I think it's our fair share. We're getting excellent service from Region 1, but we don't get that for free. And then we've got our own admin and overhead expenses, from insurance to paper clips and everything in between. Costs us money to have the office open. So we're budgeting $39,000 there. If we bring the whole thing down, you'll see that we're proposing expenses of $1.667 million. And that's exactly the same number that we had up above. So, Bishop, I think I've used my time with a fast run through on the budget. So I think you're opening it up to questions now.
I am.
And if there was questions also about my report, I could screen share that if necessary, but I'm gonna leave in your hands how you want to moderate the Q&A.
Okay. I placed a copy of the budget in the chat. It's a link. Thanks, Mark, for sharing that and explaining it. There are a lot of details, so it's always a question of how much to share. And now is the space for questions and answers. And a reminder, this is not the space for discussion. That will happen in the breakout rooms. But if you have a question of clarity or you need further explanation, now is the time. And I see Mary Latimer. Mary. Can you unmute?
Am I unmuted?
Now you are.
This is this is wonderful what you've done, Mark. I mean, I retired elementary teacher and I could even understand this. And it was really I mean, some of it. So on page 3, I was wondering on line item number 51, page 3, number 51, the holy closure accompanist. Why do we need to hire somebody to do that? And then I have several other questions too.
Bishop, I think you're best positioned to answer that
I
question.
probably am, and David Epplesheimer can help me. We have a number of congregations who, despite their best efforts, are ready to go through holy closure. And despite what one would think, that's a tremendously huge task. To get there, to do the prayerful discernment takes between 1 and 2 years. And then at the point where a congregation has reached the decision, there are legal things to go through. There is every single item in the building to discern. There is legacy gifts, or perhaps a land back opportunity, or offering it to a larger congregation for an anchor church possibility. So we have found that even though we have very well-trained facilitators to accompany some of that process, we need a better manual. We need more consistent support of the supporters, those facilitators. And if we do that work well, there will be some funds from some of those congregations to support this position. And in fact, we're weaving in an expectation that if there's a sale of the building, we would like 15% of those proceeds to go to fund this position. So at some point, it could be self-funding. And a lot of synods are moving to that model.
Okay, thank you. You know what? Isn't that funny? I'm a musician. So when I saw the word accompanist, I thought you were hiring a pianist to go.
Oh,
So that was my question. So I'm sorry you had to go through all that. I understand. Okay, back on page
I'm
2.
glad you asked, though, Mary. That's important. And this is a new position in our synod. So it's good to explain.
That is not a musician. Okay, because I would come and do it for free if you otherwise. Okay, on page 2, and that would be on the Camp Lutherwood, Mark, and whoever you had. That is wonderful to see what you've done with Lutherwood. My kids and grandkids and yours and everybody. It's a wonderful place. Thank you for doing that. Okay, I had oh, you explained the travel on number 36 because when I went through this budget, I was looking at why not Zoom more to save money, but I understand what you're saying. So can we go to page 1? And I'm going to go quickly so that other people can talk. But on page 1, on item number 4, what is SALM?
Do you want to take that one, David?
I'd be happy to, Mary. Great question. Our psalms are our synodically authorized lay ministers. So those are lay folks raised up within the congregation that are able to do worship leadership, including presiding at the table through training and mentorship, and being accompanied by our psalm board.
Okay.
And so that's what that's about. Thank you
And
for
we have
asking.
at least one psalm with us. I think I saw Frank Iragran. Oh, Jerry Lemieux is here. These are people who are serving congregations that otherwise wouldn't have leadership. It's an incredible gift to the
Like
congregation
a
and the
deacon or
synod.
a deaconess?
Well, it's like a specifically trained lay minister.
Okay. Thank you
Yeah.
for answering my questions on this. Lower hand, sorry. There.
Are there any other questions? Jackie. Oh, Dawn?
Could
Thank
line
you.
item 27 be described a little bit? I think it was kind of skipped over in the walkthrough. It was the Synod Ministry Innovation Projects. Thank you.
You're going to go here, Bishop? You want me to?
You get us started. I'll get oriented in a minute.
Um, I spoke with someone this afternoon who asked the same question, and they said, "Oh, you mean mission starts?" Well, yeah, that's what we do mean. Our innovation projects are the things we're doing for new and different styles of ministry. The largest one, at least in terms of dollars and staff, is Together Lab. Also, Storyline in Milwaukee, Story Dwelling in Bend, Queer Enough, Cully Neighborhood, those kinds of things. Those cost a lot more than $175,000, but this is what the general fund puts into them to show other grantors that we've got some skin in the game. There are, I think, 8 projects total. They each have their own budget outside of the general fund, but we do put dollars into them.
Okay, so just to make sure I understand, those are committed, that 175 that's committed dollars. Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
And I'll just say quickly that the churchwide is a big funder of those, and they're changing their model a little bit to not just invest in mission developments with like a full-time or half-time ministry leader, but also to give smaller grants to congregations for innovative funds. And they also expect the Synod to have skin in the game. So we'll be doing more of those significantly smaller ones too, so that there can be that kind of innovation and creativity all across the state. I'm really excited about the new model, and you'll be hearing more about that as we go.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for that question. Now, Don.
Thank you. I think this might be somewhat related to the previous question, but I would appreciate an explanation on page 1, line 2, the 175,000 coming from Courageous Love Innovation. What is the source of that funding, and why is that number so significantly larger than the previous budget?
Great questions. So in prior budgets, you saw a budget line for a draw from Courageous Love Fund, and you saw a second line for New Beginnings Fund. And those two funds were combined because they were in essence being used for the same thing. And so this year that draw is increased because all of that draw is coming from the one fund. Now, the second reason why it's so significant is that last year we also drew from a couple of other funds that we chose not to draw from this year to do this kind of work. And we had excellent growth in those funds from the market this year, which was another reason we felt we could increase that draw this year. As you can see, in 24, we drew 100,000. In 25, we drew 84,000. In 26, we're going down even a little bit more. But in 27, we've got all the funds together and have increased that draw to the 127. By comparison, you'll see the Congregation Transition Fund draw is down. Trying to remember, there's another fund draw that is down as well. Well, and the Primary Reserve Fund draw is down in this budget as well. And we do some of that shuffling around just because we look and see, well, where have we got significant dollars? Where have we seen an account that looks like it can bear a little more toward this?
Could you explain, please, what the source of that funding is? I mean, it's a nice term, Courageous Love Innovation Fund, but where does that money, how is that money generated?
That money has come in through several specific things. Number one, the New Beginnings Fund that was rolled into this new fund came from funds from some congregational closures many years ago. I believe that there was a congregation in Aloha, also Bethlehem Lutheran in Southeast Portland, And I think at least one other congregation, some dollars flowed into that fund. Many of the dollars were used over the years, but there still was a corpus of around 400,000 left in that. Bishop Laurie began building the Courageous Love Fund, I think, Bishop, in the second year of your first term. And we've had what I'm going to describe as fairly modest gifts to that. But in the last 2 years, when we've had significant congregations going through holy closure, we have given proceeds into this fund, significant dollar amounts. I mean, in terms of between $300,000 and $400,000 more into the Courageous Love Fund, so that when we combine them together, we have a fund that, now I'm talking off the top of my head, but I think we're in the $800,000 total balance there.
And
So basically, I'm
that's
sorry.
that's meant specifically for new innovative ministries, forward
So,
facing, the
okay.
unfolding church of God's future.
So basically, the revenue line 2 is the source of the funding that's supporting expenditure line 27. So we're taking money from closures and putting them into what, new efforts or new congregations, uh, by what, reinvesting?
My short answer to that is yes. We might want to nuance it a little more, but I'm not sure how nitty gritty we want to get on that tonight. So the short answer is yes.
And
Great,
it's also,
thank you.
thank you, Don, for the question. It's also true that there have been bequest monies that sometimes flow into that fund too. So it's life, death, and resurrection fund, really, we could call it. David?
Yes, thank you, Bishop. In the chat, Pastor Andrew Langford asked, sorry if I missed the answer. Why is line 4 zeroed out for 2027?
It has to do with a staffing issue. That is, as part of Bishop Laurie's realignment of staff, she's going to be approaching that from a different way. And it seemed reasonable to not draw money out of that reserve fund until we had identified the specific way we're going to address it. So, and remember, this is a revenue line. This doesn't mean we're not going to spend any money on Psalms. It means that we're not going to draw money out of a reserve fund for Psalms without having a specific approach identified toward that.
In our realignment work, thank you, Mark. In our realignment work, we're stepping back and evaluating what is our leadership development and educational strategy. And so we put a pause on the Lay School of Theology. Pastor Steve Kienberger.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm looking at line 43 under staffing. And I've asked this bishop, but I think for everybody's clarification, I always get worried when I see the bishop's staff being cut or seemingly cut. And so I was just wondering for clarification, what's happening with the bishop's staff?
Yeah, I love that you asked that. Thank you, Steve. The that is the position that Melissa Reed held. And she's moving into a directorship of two specific programs. One of them is leadership development, Sacred Leadership Initiative. She'll be doing that half-time. And one is the land genealogy and conversation work, Land Liberation Initiative. That'll be the second half of her work. And she won't be funded out of the general budget because that's innovation and future facing. It will come out of Courageous Love, and each year a little bit yet less because we are pretty sure she can find grant funding for that. The way we're doing it in the Oregon Synod is incredibly innovative, and so we're trusting that grant funding will come. Dawn.
Last question, I promise. Uh,
Yes.
the money, going back to the previous question that I had in regards to the the courageous life and then moving it over into the innovation, are there, I'm looking at the budget expenditures, but I see, is there any funding at all that comes out of that number two revenue that's reinvested in existing congregations to help them support their programs and to keep them alive and expand?
The money that we invest in existing congregations comes primarily through the endowment. There's an endowment board and funds for creative ministries, and those grant cycles open up once or twice a year. And then these congregational outreach ministries, which are a new approach from our ELCA churchwide offices. But honestly, much of the work of the bishop's office is oriented toward supporting existing congregations. So if any of you are, for example, congregational presidents or treasurers or administrators, we gather with you quarterly for idea sharing, support. It's all on Zoom, so no matter where you live, we want to support you. Oh, musicians, that's the fourth group. We try to make visits when we're invited. We offer workshops, bishops' convocation. So we're trying to support existing congregations in those ways. And then with Pastor Melissa Reed's new positions, she'll be offering more courses as well in leadership development, not just clergy, but lay leadership skills as well.
Thank you, Bishop.
Bishop, I want to add on to that. I think I've got the third page of the budget up here where we've got ministry staff, and we have a bishop's associate position that is described specifically as a mobility and congregational health specialist. That's certainly aimed toward congregational support. The other thing, and I'm afraid as treasurer, I don't get into the specifics of looking at studies of time for individual staff. But I believe, Bishop, you said in broadest terms, you think that about 50% of your total bishop staff time is for congregational support. Am I quoting you correctly?
Thank you for remembering that pie chart. Yes.
And lines 41 through 51, of this largest piece of our budget that we're spending, a good chunk of that is towards supporting congregations, but it doesn't show up as a specific program to support. It's the support that the bishop's office should be giving to each congregation in an ongoing basis.
Ross.
Can't hear him.
Are you unmuted? Ross, we need you to
I'm
unmute. There
sorry.
you are.
I'm
There you
sorry. Yeah, I was going to say, I know that we're pressed for time, so I'll try and keep it short. I've been really intrigued since I've been on the Synod with the process that involves holy closure and land back. And I'm wondering, maybe I missed something in the budget, but I'm wondering, this is kind of a question for Mark, I think, or perhaps you, Bishop. Are you seeing this now? I know there's a lot of moving parts to holy closure separate from land back. I don't see an indication, or maybe I didn't see it and it's in there. Do you foresee a time when there may need to be a category, for sake of better term, land back for staff or facilities or for operating expenses? Or is it too soon to get to that yet? I know we've interacted with a group called NIA, and I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I
You may
would.
not be
Thank you for that. Thank you for that question. I think the land exploration conversation that we are doing through Pastor Melissa Reed's new directorship will be an invitation for every congregation with land to consider that. So it'll be an opportunity to see how it unfolds.
Okay.
Thank
Oh,
you.
okay. Thank you.
Pastor Beth.
I'm jumping back to line 43 with just since we're moving to a different model, what are some of the changes, if any, might be experienced for, you and Juan Carlos, as well as congregations, since we're moving away from two full-time staff associates?
Well, we're as we were reimagining what role Melissa Reed would play, that's when we pulled in Pastor David Epplesheimer. So now there are two full-time bishops associates. What we've done a little bit is consolidated the roles. So Pastor Epplesheimer really handles mobility and congregational conversations around direction and future. And Juan Carlos manages all the innovation work. We used to share it a lot more, and that was exciting and energizing and complicated. So now the three of us plus Jame's role has increased to chief operating officer. The four of us are the executive staff, and then we have directors. So Melissa is a director of two programs, one about leadership, one about land. Sarah Loze is our director of climate resilience and disaster prevention, and then all of our mission developers. So core staff numbers hasn't really changed, but we're putting more of our innovation monies into strategic leadership development to support congregations. And the land resolution that we passed, we're putting half of Melissa's time to support that work. Does that make sense?
Makes great sense. Thank you.
Okay.
Really, everybody is specializing a little more so that
Yes, that's
you
right.
can really be intentional in each area. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions? Okay. It may be time for us to be sent into our breakout rooms. This will be the space for more thinking out loud, wondering, conversations. Thankfully, we have facilitators who are not experts on this budget, but will help facilitate the conversations. And then recorders will record what you say and make sure that that information gets back into the hands of our treasurer and our Synod Council.
Hey, with that, I'm going to send you into the breakout rooms. And when it gets to be a couple minutes to the end, I will click the button to bring you back. But if you're still discussing, stay there. You got 2 more minutes left before it closes on you, and then we'll come back together. So here we go.